You've seen the McKinsey Way, but now let's go into the McKinsey Mind. If you haven't already seen my video on everything you need to know about the McKinsey Way, well, check it out after this one. But today we're going to talk about the sequel, the McKinsey Mind. In fact, this book was co-authored by the same guy that wrote the McKinsey Way, Ethan Rasiel, and the two kind of go hand in hand. The McKinsey Way teaches you much more about the theory, but the McKinsey Mind is the practical how-to guide. If the McKinsey Way is your theory test, the McKinsey Mind puts you firmly in the driving seat. Firmly. Do you see what I did there? There's 4 things that you're going to get from this book. The first is how to frame a problem so that you can tackle it. Secondly, how to come up with a hypothesis to solve the problem. Thirdly, identify what analysis you need to do to quickly prove or disprove your hypothesis. And finally, how to tell the client. Although this book brands itself as being quite McKinsey-y, to be honest, regardless of which firm you work for, I think everyone can take something from it. I'll be honest, I've been 4 years in Accenture now, and I've learnt a lot from both the McKinsey Way and the McKinsey Mind. My summary isn't intended to replace the book. To be honest, I think it's worth reading cover to cover. But I want to use this video to give you a bit of a taster and to help you understand if there's any bits that you want to do in more detail. So, let's get stuck in. McKinsey's approach to problem solving is its brand, and that approach is hypothesis-based problem solving. But to be honest, I'm not in McKinsey and I've still found it useful. The first part of this book covers framing the problem. And this firstly involves validating that the problem the client says they have and the one they actually have are the same thing. Like we said in the previous video, if you walk into a GP surgery and say there's a problem, they'll ask you a bunch of questions to validate the thing you say is the pain point is the real pain point. And consultants are just like GPs, we never trust our patients. But once we have validated the right problem statement, then we can go about working out how to solve it. This is where you use techniques like McKinsey and logic trees. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I covered them quite extensively in the previous video, so be sure to go and check that out. But really what these do, McKinsey stands for mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. Put simply, this is around don't repeat yourself and think of everything. Once you've done this and put it into a logic tree, then it gives you all of the Lego blocks that make up that problem. And what you're doing at this stage is just creating some order out of chaos. When you've done these, you can take a step back and looking at them all together starts to give you an idea of what your initial hypothesis is. In stage 2, we move on to analysing our hypothesis. To me, this was actually the most useful part of the book, even though I'm now a manager and I'm 4 years into consulting. Really what they do here is focus on helping you identify what just enough analysis looks like. You've probably come across the term analysis paralysis. It gets to a point where you do so much analysing, you're actually over-analysing and you're putting in more effort than the value you're getting out of it. The law of diminishing returns. But how do you know where to draw that line? Well, that's what this part of the McKinsey Mind helped you to understand. And this just might be my favourite quote from the book. Here they remind us that the aim is to get the most important information as quickly as possible, rather than all the information. I think that getting into the habit of this is the secret behind McKinsey Consultant's ruthless efficiency. How do we do this? We find the key drivers. No, this is not people steering cars. This is about identifying the key factors that impact our problem statement the most and going after the bits and the questions in the logic tree that relate to them. Analysis can mean a few things. It can mean sorting through reams of data and preparing different Excel models, but it can also mean some of the softer stuff, like stakeholder interviews. Now, there's a practical guide on how to conduct effective stakeholder interviews in both this book and also the McKinsey Way. But I'll give you the 3 key things you need to know. The secret is this. Prepare your objective in advance. Prepare your questions in advance. Use your ears and mouth in the proportion they were given to you. And this last bit, this is the real secret hack. When you've finished an interview, be sure to just leave a moment of silence and then say, "Is there anything I forgot to ask?" Let the silence be and let them fill it. This is the moment that the interviewer will give you the secret gems, all the stuff they've been holding back. This is the moment they'll reveal it. And this could just be the most useful part of the interview. Now you've done all your analysis, you've collated it, I need to take a step back. What's really important here is that you mustn't shoehorn the facts to meet your hypothesis. It has to be the other way round. And this is where you and your team need to hold each other accountable for not, quite frankly, lying to yourselves. If the facts are telling you something different to your hypothesis, you must go with the facts. If you have to completely scrap this hypothesis and go back right to the beginning and go back to the drawing board, that's okay. It is better to do that than carry on with something which, objectively, the facts are telling you is wrong. You might need to iterate through this a few times, you might need to just tweak your hypothesis and then prove the tweaking, but there will come a point where you have finished your final hypothesis and you are pretty confident that this is the solution to give to the client. And that leads us nicely into stage 3. What do we tell the client? Well, you might have guessed it already, but we're going to tell them the hypothesis. But we're not just going to tell them the theoretical hypothesis. The whole value is in tailoring the hypothesis to the client context. To give you a different example, let's say I go to a fashion consultant. Now I'm 5'3". Imagine that the fashion consultant looks at me and goes, people of 5'3" tend to look good in stripes. Well, that's great, but do I look good in stripes? And we take the same approach with our clients. The clients want to know, do I look good in stripes? Not that generally people of 5'3" look good in stripes. And so it is the answer to that we present to the client. This term presenting can sound a bit overwhelming. So in the McKinsey Mind, they actually break it down into different types of presentation and how to deliver them effectively. You'll see a little bit of this in the McKinsey Way as well. And I think to get the best out of it, you kind of need to read both. But there's a few key things here specifically that are useful to know. The first is about the elevator pitch. People always talk about the elevator pitch. You get into the lift with a senior person, they ask you about your project, and you've got to be able to tell them in a snappy line. Elevator pitches are often talked about in the context of entrepreneurs and startups, but what this book shows you is it's actually relevant for you as a consultant as well. It's not unheard of that you spend hours preparing this beautiful presentation, it's really detailed, the models look great, and aesthetically, it's absolutely banging. Then you get into the session, and the client says, "Yeah, I don't want to see any slides, just give me the headlines." And that is the moment that you need to be ready to whip out your elevator pitch. You always need to have it in your back pocket. And your elevator pitch is simply your hypothesis in a nutshell. But let's say that the client does actually want to listen to the whole presentation. The secret here is around how you structure it. Now, when it comes to delivering presentations to clients, they don't want you to build suspense, right? We're not doing a movie here. We're not in a TV program. We don't want to wait for episode 2. We just want to get to the conclusion. And this is where McKinsey Mind talks about deductive reasoning. This is when you go into your presentation and you actually start with the conclusion. Now, if you're fresh out of uni, sometimes this goes against what they teach you in your course. But you have to unlearn some of these habits. It's when you go in and you say, "I believe in X because of A, B, C. I believe we need to do this because of factor 1, factor 2, factor 3. And you deliver it, bang, to the client like that. And then you pick the rest of your presentation in unpicking the logic and basically getting their buy-in. And really what this book reminds us is that the whole purpose of a presentation in this context is to get buy-in. And there's a secret way that you can get ahead in doing this, and it's what McKinsey call pre-wiring. Honestly, it's just a fancy McKinsey term for sending the slides ahead of time. This is when you just send the message, you send the slides before the meeting so that you use the actual presentation time to address any objections and any concerns. What's uber helpful is when those people that you think might have some objection to the message actually respond to you in advance so you can be prepared on the front foot for the type of questions they're going to ask. This is the secret hack to looking uber professional, and also it's much easier for you. We could sit here all day talking about the McKinsey Way, the McKinsey Mind, and the relationship between them. But the simple facts are this. If you haven't read the McKinsey Way, it's okay. You'll still get something out of this. If you have, then you'll find that it's more practical and applicable to consulting more generally. I actually think that this is probably the more accessible book out of the two. And if you're looking for a bit of a kind of one-stop shop, general consulting life skills, consulting life advice, then this is probably the book to start with. But the McKinsey Way will help you really unpick things like logic trees and McKinsey that it doesn't go into so much detail in here. Whatever your starting point. When you finish this book, you'll understand how to frame a problem, decide what analysis needs to be done to quickly prove or disprove your hypothesis of the problem, and how to present it back effectively to clients. Honestly, whatever firm you work for, these are essential consulting skills, and every consultant should read this. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a like. If you've read the book and you want to share your thoughts, then please drop a comment down below. Likewise, if there's any consulting books that you want me to review, then please drop a comment. I'll happily read them and review them on the channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out. See you on the next one.